Yeah.
This is Geek Therapy Radio.
What are we waiting for?
And now your mental curator, Johnny Hamburger.
Welcome to Geek Therapy Radio. I am your mental curator, of course, Johnny Hamburger, and I'm very excited for the show today because I guess this is his third time on the show, so I guess I technically can say longtime friend of the show since David, I think I had you on a year ago for the first time, maybe a year and a half ago. My guest is David Murray. You might know him as the 8-Bit Guy on YouTube. David, how are you doing today?
Johnny, I'm doing great. Glad to be here.
Awesome. So some may or may not know, you've got, how many YouTube channels do you have? Most people might know you as the 8-Bit Guy, of course, but I do believe you have more YouTube channels, at least one more. Can you describe it?
Well, I've had many over the years. There's only two that I've been active on like the last 3 or 4 years, which is the 8-Bit Guy and then another one called 8-Bit Keys. Mm-hmm. And primarily the 8-Bit Guy, though, that's like my main channel. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I think 8-Bit Keys is so fascinating because I saw a video actually I was watching it the other day. You were doing a review of, I want to say it was the Volt or the i3, the BMW i3, and you went into a thrift shop, I want to say in Waco. Your wife requested you go visit the Magnolia store
something like that.
From the TV show, which I'm sure that my wife is gonna drag me to one day. But anyways, you found this old Casio keyboard or something for $10 or whatever. And so your channel, what do you do on 8-Bit Keys for those who are unaware?
Well, I do a lot of the same stuff that I do on the 8-Bit Guy, but rather than computers, it's usually vintage like electronic keyboards. So, I restore them, I show how they work, I take them apart, and of course I play them as well. And I usually do like some kind of demonstration in a multi-track type song with them.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of repair, a lot of restoration, stuff like that. Only just for keyboard synthesizers and stuff instead of computers. Which, interestingly enough, they share a lot of the exact same components.
I was just gonna say, yeah.
Many of those synthesizers from the 80s, they have discrete microprocessors, RAM, ROM, I/O chips, etc. They just don't have a screen.
Right.
They don't run BASIC, but they are essentially still computers.
Yeah, there's a lot of overlap. I was just going to say that the reason why the two channels are fascinating is that they do share components, and that just kind of brought me to a little question that just popped in my head because we're all geeks about something. This is a little geek thought that just came into my head. Do you think, or do you know of, and there may not be, a keyboard or synthesizer that uses the same SID chip from the Commodore?
Well, there's not a keyboard per se, but there are at least two other devices that were MIDI boxes, so to speak. In other words, they didn't actually have a physical keyboard on them, but you could attach them to a MIDI keyboard controller and play them. And one of them was called the SID Station, which I actually have a friend here in town who has one.
Cool.
I'm going to feature it at some point. And then there was another one, but I can't remember the name of it. Yeah, but both of those devices came out well after Commodore had closed up shop, and so in fact one of the limiting factors on those products was the availability of SID chips. You just couldn't get them anymore, and so
right.
I think that's why those products ceased production.
Okay, so that's kind of a good segue into the meat and potatoes of why I wanted to bring you on the show this week. You are working, and I have a feeling that, we're 4 minutes into this segment, we'll spill this over to the next segment and then possibly beyond. But you are doing something so amazing, and it's a project, it's a DIY project, you call it your dream computer. So tell us about your dream computer.
Okay, so basically, I get a lot of emails from people wanting to experiment with 8-bit-like computers that run BASIC and that are easy to understand, how should we put it, like simplistic, not using a whole lot of modern components and stuff.
Right.
And, usually the only thing I can steer people towards is a vintage computer, but these come with their own set of challenges. They're getting more and more expensive, and they're getting harder to find, and they often don't work.
Mm-hmm.
Or if they do work, they don't work very long.
Yeah.
And then people have to learn how to fix them and keep them working. The supply of parts for them is dwindling. So I just wanted to kind of create a really similar computer that would give a person that same experience of using an 8-bit computer, only I want to make it as much as possible out of off-the-shelf components that you can still buy today.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of modeling it after the Commodore operating system and style, but it's going to have a lot of, well, but basically I'm trying to get rid of all of the irritating features that people really don't care about anymore, like having to use floppy drives to store your programs and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And being able to use a modern keyboard with all the keys and the arrangement that people are accustomed to.
Right.
Yet still keep that same interface, that same, basic prompt and the ability to write assembly language. And I also wanted to make the hardware challenging in a way. For example, a lot of people were demanding, you need to put much better graphics and a more powerful processor and all that kind of stuff. And at some point I had, on each of these things, I had to draw a line and say, hey, well, it kind of starts to defeat the purpose if we start making it too powerful or the graphics too good or whatever. And so, so we wanted to keep a variety of compromises in there so that it's very much like programming an 8-bit computer, which is cool because when you have these like certain restrictions and you have to think about, well, gee, I can do this or I can compromise and do this, it creates kind of the creative process, where you have to start trying to do more with less.
Yeah.
It seems like with computers these days, it's like do less with more is the motto for modern programming.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd agree with that. For those of you just joining us, I am talking to David Murray. You may know him as the 8-Bit Guy on YouTube. You should definitely go subscribe to his channel there on YouTube. He's a local Texas guy, just like yours truly, here on Geek Therapy Radio. So it's always a thrill to talk to him. And we're talking about his dream computer. He's had a lot of people reach out to him, telling him what they want in an 8-bit computer. We should make kind of a modern, quote-unquote, 8-bit computer, but as he was just describing, it can't be too powerful, it can't be too whatever, but it's just a very fascinating conversation I'm having with David, and the reason I'm stalling like this is because the segment is almost over, and I want to talk more about this 8-bit computer, this modern, quote-unquote, 8-bit computer in the next segment. So, David, can you stick around for another segment at least?
Yeah, no problem.
Because there are some fascinating concepts and thoughts that I want to raise with you and get your opinion on here in the next segment. So we're going to do that. I'm talking to David Murray, the 8-Bit Guy. We'll be right back for more Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. You've got your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, here, and I am talking to a longtime friend of the show, David Murray. He's the 8-Bit Guy on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to his channel. And, hey, go to Geek Therapy Radio on YouTube as well and throw a subscription there. I am on the hunt for 1,000 subs, at least 1,000 subs here in 2019, and I am well on my way thanks to all of you. So thank you from the bottom of my geek heart for making that happen. But David and I were talking about a modern 8-bit computer, kind of happy with some of the modern conveniences of modern computers as far as keyboard layout and, keys being where you're used to, but being, how do I say, elegant in its 8-bit functionality. So, David, what I wanted to ask you about is you mentioned that you were building this with off the shelf parts. Can you tell us a little bit about those parts and kind of how you're supplying them?
Okay, so one of the requirements that I had was that we'd be able to build it with off-the-shelf parts without using any old stock, because we did, I don't know how popular this product may or may not get, and I don't want to get to a point where, kind of like the SID station we talked about earlier, where we get to the point where there just aren't any more chips available and then the product is dead.
Yeah.
And so that's been a bit of a challenge because a lot of the parts that we thought we could use, we found out they're really not available anymore. They're just a lot of old stock. Mm-hmm. In fact, finding a video chip was darn near impossible. So that's really the only... we decided to go with an FPGA for the video chip. Okay. And the processor is the 6.816, which is a 16-bit processor, but it's backwards compatible with the good old 6502 that was used in all the Commodore, Apple, and Atari products
Awesome.
of the 80s. So I really actually just wanted to go with the 6502, but I was kind of convinced to go with the 65816 because it is backwards compatible, so it runs all the same code, but it is a 16-bit processor, and that it can access 16 megs of RAM.
How fast does it run?
Well, theoretically up to 25 megahertz, I think. Probably won't be running it that fast, maybe like 12 or 14 megahertz.
So 12 or 14 megahertz in 8-bit mode, does it run faster in 16-bit? Is that...
Not, well, I guess it could if you're using 16-bit code. Yeah, but it'll scream compared to the 1 megahertz Commodore 64.
Yeah.
But it'll still be very slow by today's standards.
So I'm sorry, go on.
I was just going to say, so I mean, you should be able to actually write programs in BASIC that actually are fast enough to make at least modest games and whatnot. Where like on the Commodore and the Apple and the Atari, BASIC was just too slow to write much of anything other than like a text adventure game or something.
Yeah.
So,
Is there going to be any compatibility with Commodore software?
well, minimally. So for those who are familiar with Commodore products, if you take like the VIC-20 and the C64 and you compare them, for example, they can't really run each other's games, but they run the same BASIC. I mean,
Right.
literally the exact same BASIC version. And so if you write a program in BASIC on the VIC-20, it'll run on the 64 as long as you're not using any direct hardware write memory locations or something, as long as it's just strictly BASIC. And so I think we'll wind up with that same level of compatibility where we have a screen layout and editor and BASIC and everything that operates exactly the same. It'll be very familiar, and it will theoretically hopefully be able to run standard BASIC programs from the Commodore. It just won't be able to run any of the games or anything that use graphics or any of the unique hardware like the SID chip or something like that.
Right. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah. So, but that's kind of the elegance of the machine you're trying to create here. Is it the end of the world that you can't find the same, video chip or SID processor that's a Commodore 64? Because you kind of want this to be the David Murray 8-bit guy signature computer. So it's, to me, it makes it's just extra, all the cooler that it's not just a Commodore clone. We've had Commodores, the Commodore 64 and the VIC-20 and the 128 and everything like that. We don't necessarily want another one. We want the David Murray take on old 8-bit computers of the past. So that's really cool to me that it's almost like there's creativity in the limitation.
Yeah. Well, not only that, but there's actually certain advantages to breaking compatibility. For example, when someone wants to get started in programming, and sometimes it can be daunting because you say, okay, well, I want to write a game or a demo or something like that. Let's just say we want to write Tetris or Pac-Man or something like that.
Yeah.
But when you go on the Commodore 64, you're immediately judged by all of the existing versions of Tetris and Pac-Man that have already been done, which are probably going to be way better than a beginner, right?
Yeah, right.
So it can be a little bit discouraging, but when you have a brand new platform, you can be the first person to write Tetris or Pac-Man or Qbert or whatever the heck you want to write.
Yeah.
Wolfenstein 3D, whatever. You can be the first one to do that, and so you don't have to worry about being judged against somebody else's, version that they already made because it doesn't exist.
Right. It's their own. It's their own version. That's kind of the beauty of basic programming and programming in general, is that you can write it's your own game. It's your own, not just game. It can be your own word processor, your own anything. I think that's one of the beautiful things about what you're trying to do here with the Dream computer.
Yeah, and I kind of lost my train of thought there.
It's all right. So before you catch it, the question that it's on my mind, and I'm sure it's probably on a lot of other geeks' minds, is well, for instance, we have for those just joining us, I'm talking to David Murray, the 8-bit guy, talking about a computer he's building, an 8-bit computer. Here in Houston, we have, I call it the Disneyland for geeks. And I'm not just talking about Micro Center. A lot of cities have Micro Center. But the true like Disney World for geeks, I'd say. Micro Center is Disneyland for geeks. This is the Disney World, and it's a store called EPO, Electronics Parts Outlet. And what it is, it's not somewhere you go into and buy iPhones or big screen TVs. It's where you go to buy individual resistors and capacitors and potentiometers and different chips and ICs and breadboards and wires and even belts for, well, anything that needs a belt, a turntable, an old cassette player, anything like that. It's just rows and rows of solar panels and LEDs and Zener diodes. It's a really cool place. So my question is, is it theoretically possible? Is it kind of something that you're attempting to do here, to go into a store like that and use maybe most of the parts available at a store like that, individual chips and everything? You might need to special order CPUs and whatnot, unless the place I'm talking about has them. So is that the kind of off-the-shelf thing you're talking about, just kind of readily available? If you could go to Radio Shack back in the day when they existed and even had, different ICs and things like that, is that kind of what your goal is here, that someone can basically take the diagram of the computer and theoretically build it yourself? Is that something that you even want to do, that you wouldn't just sell them the complete thing, that you could just sell them the diagram and parts list?
Yeah, in theory, and there's been some discussion about that. There's, some of the problems that you do run into with trying to sell something like that, though, especially if I sold them a board or even a kit that comes with all the chips. Well, that sounds cool. There's invariably going to be people that put it together wrong or put something backwards and blow it out or whatever. And
yeah.
I'm going to have to deal with all the support and all that. And I don't know that I can handle that level of support because I just don't have the time.
True.
So, but we probably will at some point open source the design so that people could maybe just order the PCB or build their own or something like that. And I should mention, this is quite a bit of a team effort.
Yeah.
In fact, you might be surprised, but the actual person that I've got designing the board is Bill Hurd himself.
Oh, cool.
A lot of people aren't aware of that, but I actually haven't talked to Bill in a couple of weeks. But I need to get back with him. But yeah, he's designing the original board, and so he's the one that designed the Commodore 128 and the Commodore Plus 4 back in the day. So
yes.
Very experienced in that sort of thing. And then I've got at least 4 or 5 other people working with me on this project. So even though it kind of was my dream, it seems like a lot of people are already on board, and there's quite a lot of interest, way more interest than I thought there was going to be in the product, to be completely honest.
Well, it's kind of, we'll wrap up the segment here. Can you hang on for at least another one? Is that cool?
Yeah.
You got the time for it? Time for us geeks here on Geek Therapy Radio? Okay, so what was I going to say? Now you made me lose my train of thought. It doesn't matter. We'll get into it in the next segment here of Geek Therapy Radio. I'm talking to David Murray. He is the 8-Bit Guy from YouTube. Go subscribe to his channel. Go subscribe to Geek Therapy Radio, also on YouTube. We're going to talk more about his dream computer he's building in the next segment of Geek Therapy Radio. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. Mental curator Johnny Hemberger. For those just joining us, I am talking to the 8-Bit Guy, David Murray. His channel, the 8-Bit Guy on YouTube. Make sure you go subscribe to him and throw a subscribe my way as well. David's almost at 1 million subs. I am almost about to crack 1,000. So, David, I'm nipping at your heels, buddy. We all start somewhere, and you know what, David? First of all, just how are you doing today? Let's just refresh, regroup. Are you happy? Are you healthy? Are things going good?
I am overwhelmingly busy. That's about the only thing I can say.
You know what? But do you know what? Busy is better than not busy. On a personal personal geek note. I remember back when I quitted waiting tables, this is over 10 years ago, this is like 2006 or something like that, I thought, you know what, I'm going to be so happy freelancing, it's going to make me the happiest I've ever been. I quickly realized that not going to a job almost every day, I actually wound up getting a little, quite a bit more depressed when I didn't have kind of a routine to stick to. Is that something that's common? Do you think a lot of people might feel that way? Do you feel that way sometimes? If you have too much downtime, you just kind of get antsy?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's one of the problems I have is I rarely can relax because I always feel like, well, I have like this huge number of things I need to be doing because I've got like my fingers in like 10 different pies, right? So right. I'm always got something to do, and so it's really hard for me to just take some time and relax because I just feel like I'm wasting time, you know.
You know,
I work myself to death.
Yeah. I feel sometimes with our busy lives, and I'll stand there at the grocery store, and we'll get back to the computer in a second, I promise. But we're connecting here. I'll stand in a line at the grocery store that's kind of long or going too slow, and you hear people around you kind of moaning and complaining. In moments like that, I take those as kind of maybe it's kind of zen of me, but I take those moments as, hey, I've got 5 minutes to relax and there's nothing I can do about it. So I'm just going to sit here and kind of not look at my phone and just kind of, re-engage with my thoughts, check in with myself and just kind of use this 5-10 minutes that I'm forced to wait to kind of relax. So that's kind of, I don't know, if some people are if they feel like they're going a million miles an hour, doing a million things, like there's times in our lives where we do kind of have to wait. So maybe play Sudoku in your head or play Tetris in your head while you're in line. Just use that opportunity to relax. Am I kind of off base with that? Or
that doesn't work for me. I'm usually too busy thinking about all the things I could be doing if I weren't waiting in this line.
See, that's true too. There's two types of people. Some that we just gotta, to be happy, we gotta keep moving. Then there's other people who want nothing more in life than to just be still. I think I'm kind of in the middle. I appreciate the times where I can be still, but I also, like, from personal experience, I know that I need to keep moving to feel like I'm like adding to society or something like that.
One of the problems I'm having right now, which is something I haven't talked about a lot lately, but I'm sure, I think we actually talked about Planet X3 on one of the last times I was on your show, which was like sometime last year.
Right.
And I'm actually in the shipping phase of that. So, I finished the game in December, and I got all the materials here, I think around late January or early February, and then started shipping. Mm-hmm. And one of the problems I ran into is that it's taking much, much more time to ship the thousands of copies of this game than I thought it was going to take.
Yeah.
My wife and my daughter have been helping me, and we can only ship out about 40 or 50 copies on a given day. And I think on a weekend, we can ship out maybe 100. Mm-hmm. And it's just, it's a lot more work to assemble these boxes, put all the, different things that go in it, and then, print the shipping labels and then of course all that has to go into a different shipping box. It has to be folded up and taped and all of that. And in reality, it takes, around 10 minutes to assemble in, one box. You wouldn't think it would take that long. I never did.
Yeah.
And so, that's just absolutely killing me because I'm spending 5 or 6 hours a day trying to get Planet X3 shipped off to all the people who backed it on the Kickstarter. Yeah. And it's really robbing me of time to devote to my YouTube channel, which is and my computer project that we've been talking about. In fact, I haven't hardly done anything on the computer project since I posted that first video about it a while back, because I'm just going to have to wait until I get done shipping all these Planet X3 games before I can devote more time to that.
Well,
on the bright side, we're about 3/4 of the way through, so hopefully in another 2 or 3 weeks we'll be done.
Be kind of caught up. Hey, I'm going to be opportunist here for a second. If you ever need help with a YouTube video, I'll be happy to make one for you for your consideration at least. You can think about that. We'll talk about that later. But are you finding so when you design and code and put all the blood, sweat, and tears into making a game like Planet X3, which listeners, I'm talking to David Murray from the 8-Bit Guy on YouTube. He's made a game called Planet X3. What is it? What are all the platforms it's currently available on right now, David?
Just MS-DOS. I mean, of course, it runs on practically any MS-DOS computer, whether it be CGA or VGA or Tandy or whatever. But yeah, just MS-DOS.
So after all the blood, sweat, and tears, while you were developing the game, did you think that just the actual nut and bolts of the shipping process was gonna take so much time?
No. Yeah, I mean, I thought it might take 2 weeks to ship all of the Kickstarter backers, and I guess boy was I wrong.
It's kind of a welcome surprise, though, wouldn't it be? Almost in a way.
It was a very unwelcome surprise that it's taking that long to fulfill all the orders. Yeah.
That's true. But we're talking about your dream computer. You said you didn't know kind of what the response would be to it. So when you made Planet X3, I'm sure you weren't kind of thinking about or you were wondering what the response to that would be. And would you say it's been kind of overwhelming?
Well, yeah, I mean, there was way more people pre-ordered the game than I expected. But even then, I really didn't think it would take that long to ship them all. I always thought the hardest part would be coding the game, and then once I was done coding it, the rest would be downhill. But really, it's turned out to be kind of the opposite. That shipping has actually been more of a challenge than coding it.
Yeah, it's interesting how life kind of throws us that curveball, how you can be so focused on one aspect of it, where we have tunnel vision towards coding the game, and then all of a sudden we get blindsided by, holy crap, this is really popular, and it takes 10 minutes to assemble the packages, and I have thousands of backers that I got to get this out to. It's ironically funny. It's not really funny, but it's kind of how we get blindsided by the logistics of the whole thing. Kind of, it's kind of.
In fact, a lot of people have been wondering why I haven't done any kind of follow-up video on my YouTube channel. Talking about the completion of Planet X3, and the main reason is because what would happen is that would generate sales. Like, people would want to go to my website and buy it, but I actually don't even have the game up for sale right now because I can't ship it. I'm still trying to fulfill all the Kickstarter orders, so I don't even want to generate any interest in the game. I'm actually kind of hoping people will forget about it for a little while until I can get all of the orders filled.
You're like the Elon Musk of vintage computers and vintage computer games. I'm just going to make this thing, and all of a sudden you're overwhelmed by all the orders you're getting. So you got to go on Twitter. I'm sorry, the shipping. We're working on manufacturing and things like that. To a lot of entrepreneurs listening, they might think, oh, that's a welcome problem, overwhelming response and overwhelming orders. But take it from David, there is logistics that you have to. That sometimes are unplanned for, and David Murray, the 8-Bit guy, and Elon Musk are dealing with the same thing. Holy crap! A lot of people want my game, and a lot of people want my cars, and I'm having it's a struggle to get them all out there. David, I remember what I was going to talk about at the beginning of at the end of the last segment. I'm going to bring it up here in the last couple minutes here in this segment, before I lost my train of thought, was back to the dream computer, and we were talking about, are you going to maybe release a diagram of how people can kind of go buy the parts themselves and assemble it? And then you said that's kind of creates another logistical nightmare of support, since you're basically one of the only people who's going to be able to support this. And the parallel I was drawing there again was to Tesla. It'd be like if Elon Musk and Tesla sent out the diagrams and the blueprints to build a Model 3, and then people went to just hobbled together a bunch of old golf cart batteries and different motors and things like that, and then they emailed Tesla support, my Tesla doesn't work and you're on the hook for it. Is that something you're probably trying to avoid, some sort of situation like that? Someone coming to you with a breadboard of the most horribly soldered spaghetti mess of nonsense, and then saying, well, you told me to build it this way, and then just that kind of whole headache. I guess you're trying to avoid that.
Believe it or not, I've actually been through that. Way long time ago, back in the early 2000s, I used to be the service manager of a computer store, and we actually had people do that all the time. They would buy like a motherboard and a case and a video card and all this kind of stuff, take it all home and put it together, and then they'd bring it over to the service department, want us to tell us why it didn't work and fix it for free, and they'd be like, well, all these parts are under warranty. Yeah. And I would use a similar analogy. I said, well, hey, if you went down to the Honda dealer and bought all the parts to build a Honda Accord, and you put it together yourself, the service department's not going to service that for you.
Right.
Or at least not under warranty anyway.
They've got their 3D Voodoo Effects video card jammed into the slot loading CD-ROM bay. Like,
yeah, I saw all kinds of crazy stuff.
Why doesn't the video work? Yeah. Let's talk about more about that in the last segment. Can you join me for one last segment, David? All right, cool. I'm talking to David Murray, the 8-Bit guy from YouTube. Go subscribe to his channel. It's the 8-Bit guy on YouTube. We'll be right back with more Geek Therapy Radio with David Murray and yours truly in just one moment. Welcome back to Geek Therapy Radio. I'm your mental curator, Johnny Hemberger, joined here, for those of you just joining us, with David Murray, also known as the 8-Bit guy on YouTube. Go subscribe to his channel. Go subscribe. He's almost at 1 million subs. Help push him over, and help push me over 1,000 piddly little subs on the Geek Therapy Radio YouTube channel. I've got a lot of cool videos on there. It's not just kind of radio stuff, but it's more specialized videos as well. It's really neat. I just covered the Corvette. And speaking of cars, David, you were telling me during the break that you just bought a Model 3, and that just got my nerd feelers all tingly and bristled because I know for a fact that my next car is most likely going to be a Model 3. I can't wait for the day that I can afford that, make that happen. As you know, I just told you I got married recently and we're house hunting, so there's kind of priorities that come before getting a new car. But David, what made you buy the Model 3, and can you tell us your experience with electric cars before that?
So, I'm a long-time owner. I'm an early adopter. We started with a Nissan Leaf back in 2011, I think, and we've had, Chevy Volt. Now my wife has a Chevy Bolt. I know B and V. It's easy to get them mixed up.
Yeah.
And then we've had a BMW i3, which you saw in that one video.
Mm-hmm.
So we've had quite a few of the EVs, and in fact, I got my daughter a Fiat 500e that we bought here used for like $7,000 that we found at a used car dealer because she just got her driver's license.
What's the range on that, by the way? That's awesome.
Oh,
though.
It's not very much. It's like 80-something miles.
Yeah.
And it doesn't even have a fast charge port, but it's fine for a teenager. She's
Right.
not likely to go any more than 10 miles from the house.
Exactly.
For a couple of years. So.
And you charge them every night like you charge your cell phone, so it's always topped up.
Yeah, she doesn't have to worry about going to get gas or finding money to get gas or any of that kind of stuff. She can charge here at home and to drive to school and back and whatever she needs to do.
Right.
The Model 3, I don't know. I mean, I've been thinking about one for quite a while, and actually, you might think I ordered mine from Tesla, but actually I found it at a used car dealer here in the Dallas area.
Awesome.
And I just went ahead and it was pretty low miles. I went ahead and picked it up. I traded in my Volt for it. I really, and I don't want to give anybody the impression that I didn't like my Volt. It was actually kind of a sad sorrow seeing it go because it was actually one of my favoriteest ever cars that I had. But I have to admit the Model 3 makes pretty much every car I've ever owned before look like a dinosaur. Especially after driving it for a while, it's just it's kind of like getting an iPhone when all you've ever had in the past was like a like a flip phone, like a Motorola Razr or something like that.
Right.
Not that those phones aren't cool, but their time is gone.
Yeah.
Their time is come and gone.
Yeah. So the Model 3, did you have what is the setup on the Model 3?
The setup?
Like, did you get the extended range or kind of what options? Do you know anything about that?
Mine is the long-range model.
Cool.
It's one of the first ones that they started producing. So it's got the 310 miles of range. It's just the standard rear-wheel drive. So it's not the performance model with the four-wheel drive that you see on YouTube in the drag strips. However,
right.
I have to admit, when I drove the thing off the lot and floored it for the first time, I actually kind of wondered if they'd made a mistake and sold me the performance model because I'm like, holy cow, this thing is fast. And I had to look up the specs. I think it was 0 to 60 in 4.9 seconds. Yeah. And that's the non-performance model.
Right.
That's the standard,
That's a space model. And something that's really cool, as I'm sure you know from having... How long have you had it so far?
Like 6 or 7 months now.
Okay. So one of the things I know that Tesla does that's really, really cool is that when that first model, when your Model 3 first came out, when the first owner took delivery of it, I almost guarantee you the 0 to 60 was slower, but you're able to modify and tune cars with OTA, over-the-air updates for your freaking car. So Musk was working with his team and said, you know what, we can make the Model 3 faster, and just over the internet, over the Wi-Fi or over your LTE, whatever, you woke up the next morning and the car was faster. To me, that's one of the coolest things in the world.
That is actually accurate. It wasn't a lot. I remember, because when I get in the car, if there's been an update overnight, there will be like a message on the center screen saying, okay, these things have been updated. You can kind of scroll through and look at all the changes. Mm-hmm. And yeah, they did say it was like a 5% performance boost and a small range increase as well. But there have actually been multiple operating system updates since I've owned it, just in the short time I've had it. I mean, it's kind of like when you get an operating system update on your phone. I mean, it's,
right.
In many ways, it's annoying because you used to one thing being like the radio controls, for example, got changed around. I was like, I got in there one morning and I'm like, whoa, where'd the button go to do that?
Yeah.
And then like, oh, they moved it over here. So, I mean, that's a little bit annoying because you get used to something.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the operating system is constantly evolving, just like it would be on your phone or anything else.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I guess that's kind of good.
In the fact that the manufacturer can just update it. I mean, there's no traditional ICE vehicle, internal combustion engine vehicle that, I mean, they can do over-the-air updates in some ways for different, I don't know, stuff for the infotainment system, but you cannot download 2 extra cylinders, or I guess you could download horsepower in the way that they can kind of maybe adjust timings of the engine and something like that. But as far as they can't really download an update to, like I said, give you an automatic transmission versus the manual you had, or add cylinders or make your fuel tank bigger. So that's kind of the new era where we're entering into with electric cars, and that's one of the reasons why as a geek, as a nerd, I am stoked about eventually getting a Model 3. And I think Tesla was able to do something which I kind of have always thought from the beginning is kind of the holy grail with environmentalism, is that, you know, previously, before Tesla, you know, discounting the Chevy EV1, which is a whole conspiracy theory in itself, electric cars were fuddy-duddy and dorky, and no one really wanted them from an aesthetic version. But what Tesla did is they made electric cars and renewable energy and all that sexy and desirable and marketable. Like, he used capitalism and the market to his advantage to advance environmentalism, which was brilliant. I always saw that as a flop. Like, previously, you're marketing being good to the environment. You're marketing it in a way that doesn't make, you know, Joe Schmo in Iowa excited about it.
Well, you're right, and I'll tell you, back when I had the Leaf, for example, you know, and the Volt and whatnot, I used to. Well, people always used to think I bought those cars because I was a tree hugger.
Yeah,
and it wasn't. I just bought the cars because I liked the technology. I thought it was cool because I'm a nerd. I'm a geek, whatever you want to call me. And I liked the high-tech aspect of it. That's why I used to drive a Prius before that.
Exactly.
Not because I was a tree hugger, but I liked the back then, like, you go back like 15 years ago, the Prius was one of the most high-tech cars you could get.
Right.
And so, but I used to tell, like, when I would go to these events and there'd be like a rep there from Nissan or something, I'd say, look, all your commercials and all your advertising for this car is advertising the car specifically to environmentalists.
Right.
And, you know, I used to even complain, like, on the back of the car, like on the Nissan, it had this big badge that said zero emission. And I used to tell the reps at Nissan, I'm like, look, you need to get rid of this badge and just say, replace it with something like electric, because nobody on the road cares that it's zero emission.
Exactly.
That's not a selling point unless you're a tree hugger.
Right.
And I always complain to these people. I'm like, look, you need to understand that there's a huge market for EVs, but if you market them as tree hugger mobiles, right, you're going to be limited to like 1% of the market, because, you know, it's kind of like selling fat-free ice cream, right? I mean, it's even if it tastes better than the regular ice cream, if it's marketed only as, you know, oh, this is fat-free ice cream, it's more healthy for you, and that's like the only marketing you give it, people are going to walk right by it, and they're going to get the regular fattening kind of ice cream, right? Because they're just going to assume it tastes better, right? And it's the same thing with these EVs, and I think the manufacturers are getting it now. Tesla kind of, you know, Elon Musk had it right. I mean, he's like, hey, let's use this technology for what it's capable of, and market it as cool rather than market it as, because you never hear Tesla, well, I mean, not ever, but rarely do you ever hear them talk about their cars as environmentally friendly, because that's not who they're marketing to, even though they are. That's not who they're marketing to. Yeah, and so I did big props for them, because they figured it out, and the other car companies have been lagging behind for years, and they're finally starting to get it too with some of the new products that are coming out.
Right, David, I couldn't agree with you more. We are at the end of the show now. Is there a timeline on the Dream Computer? Is there anything you want to plug right now, or anywhere you want to send listeners to help you out in any sort of way? Is there anything you want to tell us about?
Really, I have a Facebook group that you can look up called Commander 16 Prototype, and there's like 7,000 members in that group already, and that's where we discuss all of the ongoing development with the public. I mean, we have other channels where we talk between ourselves, but yeah, with the public, that's kind of where we talk about all the things going on with it. Yeah. But other than that, it's going to be a year or two before that product's finished, so I wouldn't get in any big hurry.
Well, great things take time. David, thank you so much for joining me here on Geek Therapy Radio. David Murray has the YouTube channel, The 8-Bit Guy. Go follow his Facebook page. Go subscribe to him on YouTube. David, thank you so much for coming on Geek Therapy Radio again.
Well, thanks for having me.
One more big thanks for David for coming on Geek Therapy Radio. His Facebook group is Commander X16 Prototype if you want to go discuss the upcoming 8-bit computer project. For those just listening to the broadcast, I will include a link in the podcast description, so make sure you're subscribed there. Other than that, have a great week, everybody.